Boy, has this been quite a year. It's been very eventful in general and a great year for movies. It's also been a very unique year for film. Unlike last year, it's not very top heavy, and unlike the year before, it is definitely not lacking in quality. I watched close to 50 2024 releases, and my long list going into this video was over 30 movies long. This year's line of releases were strong, entertaining, and most of all, unpredictable. Due to this, unlike past years, the top 10 lists you'll see from YouTuber to YouTuber and site to site will vary a lot due to how deep this year has been. Last year felt very similar to 2019 in that a lot of the masters of the century thus far came together to drop so many high quality projects. This year was defined by a lot of smaller, or at least previously more niche stories, filmmaking styles, and filmmakers getting a chance to shine, and shine they did. Simultaneously, the blockbusters and typical mid-level fare from this year also raised the bar a level from 2023. Movies like Immaculate, Civil War, and Deadpool and Wolverine stirred a lot of conversation politically, socially, and in the filmmaking world. The Idea of You, Saturday Night, and Roadhouse are all very solid throwbacks in their own ways with plenty of entertainment value. All three I would describe as a great way to end off a tough day. Longlegs seems to be one of the most controversial films of the year, and I still don't fully even know how I feel about it. I do know one thing, that Nick Cage's performance here is one of my favorites of the year. We Live in Time is an immaculate representation of the fairly straightforward narrative presented. It was a bit underwhelming for me, but that is definitely a matter of overinflated expectations, as two of my favorite actors of the past decade helm this time-jumping trance through the lives of this couple. Gladiator 2 falters quite a lot in the first half, but makes up for it in the second half, and with Denzel's exceptional performance. Beetlejuice doesn't hold a candle to the original and definitely leans into cash grab land a bit more than I would like, but overall Burton's artistry and the uniqueness of this world still shine through the screen. I didn't care much for the plot, but luckily that's not what makes Beetlejuice, well, Beetlejuice. Fall Guy was one of the funnest solo theater experiences I had all year. I absolutely adore the fact that Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis exists, which for those not in the know is a $300 million passion project by arguably the Michael Jordan of film, and I really did enjoy watching this movie for the first time because the project is so densely packed with clearly 30 years worth of narrative and thematic ideas. Such an interesting movie that I will not be able to watch again for a decent while, but I have thought about quite a lot. Juror number 2 has one of my favorite screenplays of the year. My Old Ass and Drive Away Dolls work very well as a double feature showing. Drive Away Dolls is a heavily stylized film directed by Ethan Coen, which never reaches the heights that most Coen films do, but is a fun 90 minutes nonetheless. And My Old Ass feels like a coming of age story that, while still predictable in its plot beats, presents a lot of cool ideas. You know what's funny about Twisters? The first time I went to watch the movie, I walked into the wrong theater and ended up watching the last 20 minutes by accident. Then on the same day, I went into the wrong theater again and watched the 10 minutes that preceded the last 20 before giving up for the day. Then about a month later, I went to watch the full film and ended up being precisely late enough to miss the opening sequence. Then once it was released digitally, I watched the opening sequence, which is funnily enough the best part of the movie. Love Lies Bleeding is one of those movies that we just don't get every year. A part noir film, part romance, part drug-induced binge. It has an intriguing narrative, some complicated characters at the helm, and plenty of violence. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is definitely a tier below the previous trilogy, but it is still a movie with clear talent and at least some passion behind it. At least for now, I'm locked in and am interested to see where this narrative goes. Similarly, Furiosa doesn't come close to Fury Road for me and drags a bit in the middle, but what hits in George Miller's follow-up really hits. Still some great action. To me, the more digital aesthetic of this one definitely makes the imagery look worse, but weirdly didn't affect the effectiveness of the action sequences, which is definitely the most important part. Narratively, this film also sets itself apart from its predecessor, being a sprawling epic this time around opposed to an extended chase sequence. Strange Darling is a movie I went into with zero context, and I think you should too if you haven't seen it yet. Not perfect by any means, but it definitely is an experience. Smile 2 might be the movie that surprised me the most this year. The switch in perspective this time around was a great decision, and the movie has two of the tensest and trippiest sequences I've seen all year. Truthfully, The Bike Riders is just my type of movie. Helmed by two movie stars at the center, the story of the rise and fall of a biker gang doesn't overstay its welcome, felt aptly paced, and while I have my doubts about recognition, still has two of my favorite performances of the year. Inside Out 2 is just a good movie. There's no need to really overanalyze criticize it. Similarly, Challengers is definitely top 3 or 4 movie theater experiences of the year. Watched it in a packed theater with some friends and was locked in from start to end. The ending does drag the movie down a little for me, but very solid all around. Actually, it wasn't Smile 2 that surprised me the most this year. It was Transformers 1, the animated Transformers movie that immediately became my favorite Transformers movie. And I say this having a lot of nostalgia for the original Transformers film. Transformers 1 narratively, aesthetically, and thematically dog walks every other Transformers movie, and that was definitely one of the last things on my bingo board this year. And with all of these very honorable mentions from this stellar year in film, let's get into my top 10 movies of 2024. And you will find yourself. Dev Patel's directorial debut was everything that I was hoping for it to be and a little more. Dev Patel is one of my favorite actors that has come up in the past decade or so. He's bringing so much energy and passion to all of his projects, and there was no doubt in my mind that a film helmed by him, written by him, directed by him, and produced by Jordan Peele would succeed. The trailers for this movie were some of the best I saw all year. They at least got me and my friends to be there opening night. As for the film itself, the cinematography and action are two unarguable points here. This is a beautiful movie, and for probably the only time this year in an action film, I can say that I saw fight sequences and ideas that felt wholly unique and original. From the settings to the camera work to Dev Patel's clearly trained fighting style, Monkey Man truly pushes the envelope. However, for the most part, I haven't heard anybody knock this aspect of the movie. A lot of people's gripes come from the screenplay and the story itself, especially when it comes to the execution of a lot of the thematic and emotional core of the film. And while yes, it became a bit cliche at times, that's not what you came to the movie for. The narrative was good enough to let Patel's abilities as a filmmaker truly shine. The camera work and action in Monkey Man are clearly inspired, feel fresh, and oftentimes feel like characters of their own. Not to mention the setting too, which I've been told captured the vibe and suffocation of a crowded street in Mumbai perfectly. My only gripe comes with the ending showdown, which, as I said, can lean into cliche territory a little bit, but that's why Monkey Man is at my number 10 spot. I still think Hotel Mumbai is a film with a little more to offer, but Monkey Man definitely did not disappoint, especially as a directorial debut, and I am locked in to see what Dev Patel and Jordan Peele do next. A lot of my reasoning for Alien Romulus' placement on this list mirrors Monkey Man's. Despite being franchise fare, Alvarez's film is insanely innovative, action-packed, and has some great characters and great character motivations at its core. This movie acts as both an amazing individual project, being a reboot to the series and a wholly new story, while also being a great sequel to the original 1979 Alien film. Once again, and similar to Monkey Man, the cinematography here is breathtaking. Watching this in theaters was a huge privilege, and hopefully someday this movie gets re-released so I can see the pure level of scale from a cinematography perspective on the big screen again someday. I will say this movie takes a little bit longer than anticipated to truly get going, at least on the action front, but once it does, each set piece gets grander, the stakes get raised, and the character deaths feel more and more potent and weirdly realistic. Great movie that I'd recommend checking out whether you're into the Alien series or not. In my books, Alien Romulus and Monkey Man are the best pure action films of this year. Now, let's move on from the action genre to two of my favorite animated films of the year. Oshiyama's Look Back, clocking in at a brisk 58 minutes, presents the story of two classmates and their journey to becoming manga artists. Standing at just an hour, this film is one of the most patient and well-paced of the year. The animation and storytelling style teeter the line of realism and surrealism perfectly, which is so apt for a story about artists, their stories, and their struggles. A truly beautiful and emotional movie that I cannot recommend enough. Not a single word is uttered throughout the entirety of Flow. There isn't a single live human being throughout this movie. It follows a cat, a lab, a capybara, a lemur, and a bird in their journey through a Noah's Ark style post-apocalyptic world. The use of time and the visuals throughout this film are unmatched by any other film from this year. Flow somehow contains one of the best screenplays and plots of the year without a single word being spoken. The story here is always expanding while also being cyclical in many ways, mirroring the human experience quite a lot for an animated film without a single one. This is done through immaculate soft world building, also almost unparalleled by any other projects from this year. Plus, as of the release of this video, it is still in theaters, and just like Look Back, Flow is a brisk watch standing at just 85 minutes. Cannot recommend this one anymore.
worship and obey thee, and perform thy unholy bidding. We're gonna have to take a quick break.
Late Night with the Devil stirred quite a lot of conversation around AI and the use of AI in film, which is a topic I'd love to dive into one day, but there has been nowhere near as much conversation about the quality of the film itself, which given its placement on this list, you can probably tell I think it is quite a good movie. For context, I watched this movie solo in a theater right after a class in the middle of the week, and frankly, it scared me for the rest of the day. I think it was daylight savings too, so a lot was in play, but this movie was so effective that I turned the heat up to 80 when I got back to the crib and just blanketed up. Especially with a lot of the frames within frames in the visuals, the format of the narrative being a late night broadcast show, the format and oral design of the film itself, everything worked so well and provided a very memorable and unpredictable experience with one of my favorite third acts of the year. Truly an instant cult classic right here. Also, David, last name, has never disappointed, and I hope to continue to see him in leading roles for a very, very long time. Richard Linklater's Hitman really only needed 3 things to work to make it on my list. Glen Powell needed to be good and charming, the comedy needed to hit, and the pacing needed to be just right. All 3 of these worked, and Linklater, just like Fincher did with The Killer in the action genre last year, put his own uniquely enjoyable spin on the rom-com genre. I'm also a bigger fan of rom-coms than most, so Hitman is definitely higher on my list than I anticipated to be for a lot of other people. But this is a thoroughly enjoyable and a very rewatchable film. Also, it seemed to be quite a hit, which I did not expect at first. The Wild Robot takes place in 3 very distinct but also immensely dependent acts. In the first, a robot learns how to become a parent. In the second, a robot learns how to deal with loss and letting go. And in the final, the robot learns acceptance. When I saw this movie, I went into it fairly blind, and it took me on a roller coaster ride, and trust me, the breathtaking animation did not help. I was immersed in hurt and in awe all at once. There are so many grand and meticulously put together sequences that do not allow for you to breathe until they're over. The main relationship is so well written, and every side animal is just as defined and useful here. The final antagonist could have felt abrupt if written badly, but luckily the source material and plotting never faltered. The music did take me out a bit sometimes. I definitely would have preferred a pure score, especially with a story like this, but I understand why DreamWorks decided to use the songs that they did. Moreover, this is another film that is very interesting to look at from the perspective of an increasingly automated and AI-run world, but that's a topic for another day. Shawn Wang's directorial debut, Didi, goes into the same pantheon that The Farewell, Past Lives, Aftersun, Sorry We Missed You, and Minari fall into, which FYI, those are all movies that have made my recent years' lists, and usually my number 3 spot ends up going to a film about a struggling family, or some sort of immigrant story in general. With Didi, this aspect definitely connected with me, but even more, Didi is the first time I've watched a movie that takes place when at least part of my childhood took place. Moreover, it's not just that this is the first time and that's why it's so good, it also captured the feeling of the mid to late 2000s and early 2010s, and being somebody growing up during this time better than I have ever seen it captured before. This must be how people that grew up during the 70s felt when they saw Dazed and Confused for the first time. Wang is somebody to watch out for as a director. This is such a wonderfully paced, beautifully shot, and potently acted film. From top to bottom, the actors are doing an amazing job here, and also this is one of the funniest movies of the year too, a must watch if you grew up in the internet era during this time. Wonderfully paced and so realistic. The serious moments hit just as hard as the funny ones do. When it comes to Sean Baker's Anora, I'll be very brief since I have a Sean Baker video coming out soon, but clearly I think this is an exceptional film. The funniest movie I've seen all year. 2 of my best theater going experiences of the year are with Anora. Also a very potent film given some of the societal context. Another must watch if you don't mind the very vulgar content here.
You fought well, Atreides.
And last but not least is Dune Part 2. I will also remain brief here since I talked about Dune 1 and Dune 2 in my Denis Villeneuve video, which is linked in the eye icon with every other video that would be helpful with any movies I talked about here throughout the year. As aforementioned, I have Dune 2 as Denis' magnum opus. I watched this movie at least 6 times in theaters and at least twice since it came home. And the main reason why I watched this movie 6 times in theaters is because it is the ultimate theater film. Yes, the narrative, the story, characters, score, and all are of the highest quality too, but nothing compares to watching Dune Part 2 in IMAX with the booming Dolby sound around you. But when we're talking about why people go to the movies, take time out of their busy days, sit down in the dark theater and look for an escape, Dune Part 2 is that ultimate escape. An experience that in the right theater transcends the visual oral and maximizes and pushes the medium of film with each and every scene that it presents. I adore this film. I can't wait to rewatch it again sometime. Truthfully, not soon. I got a detox from Dune for a little while, but nonetheless, it's an amazing movie. Here, you can see my top 10 movies of 2024 all on one screen. My Letterboxd list is in the link in the description and will be updated as I watch all of these movies here on this page, which I did not unfortunately have the chance to check out. This has been a great year for me, and while I did hope to post more videos this year, I do think that I had a good focus on quality releases throughout 2024. I did end up becoming a bit busier than expected, but also I did release 6 videos instead of 5, so I improved at least a little bit. Heading into next year, consistency is my goal with this channel. I want everybody that made it to this point in the video to look forward to this slate of releases throughout January and February, and hold me to these slate of releases throughout January and February. Thanks so much for the view, and have a blessed new year.